And Jean?
Jacksonville 911.
Yes, sir. Hi. This is, I went out to play this afternoon. I thought she was with her, and now she's missing.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
Where was she playing at around the house?
Right around the house here.
Is she a white female or a black
Yes,
female?
she's a white female.
What did she have on when she left?
She had on a red T-shirt. And, Mama, did she have on jeans? No, I've been upstairs, Mama. I have searched.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Blue jeans?
Mama, did she have on blue jeans? What'd she have on? What kind of shorts?
Pair of shorts?
She had on a pair of shorts and a red T-shirt.
She blonde hair? Black
No,
hair?
she's got reddish-brown hair. It's actually a brown with an auburn tint to it.
What's her name?
It's short. Her name is Maddie. She goes, it's Madeline.
What's her last name?
Clifton, C-L-I-F as in Frank, T-O-N.
When's the last time anybody saw her?
Mama, what time did I come home from boating? About 5:30?
About 5.
4:30 to 5 o'clock. About 5:30 was the last time we saw her. And I was letting the kids play out here for a little while, and then she disappeared, and nobody knows where she's at.
Does she have any friends nearby? Did you go check?
I got every neighbor out here right now.
Okay, the police will be there shortly, ma'am. You keep looking, okay?
Okay, do you know where I am? I mean, I'm at the corner of Fleetwood and Stephen is right there.
What is it?
My husband just came home. And, hold on just a moment. Honey, Maddie is gone. No. Okay, my husband just pulled up, but she's not with him, of course.
Okay, the police are going to be there shortly, ma'am, okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The frantic 911 call you just heard was made by Maddie Clifton's mother, Sheila, in the moments after realizing her young daughter was missing. As police arrived and neighbors gathered to search, no one could imagine the heartbreaking and horrifying conclusion this case would reach. The following footage contains previously unseen crime scene photos. The last person to see 8-year-old Maddie Clifton alive on November 3, 1998, in Jacksonville, Florida, was you and her neighbor, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips. Living just across the street, you two had become friends, often playing together. On that day, Maddie had gone over to Josh's house to play softball in his backyard. She never made it back home. Around 5 p.m., her mother made the distressing 911 call you heard when she realized Maddie couldn't be found. The last time she was seen, she was wearing a red YMCA basketball jersey with her name on the back in large letters. Immediately, hundreds gathered to search, combing through the woods around her home and even dumpsters. At the start of the search, Josh asked Maddie's mom what was happening, eagerly joining the community effort to find his friend. Distraught upon learning Maddie was missing, he did everything he could to help, posting flyers and aiding in mapping out the area. Maddie's face, often adorned with a Kool-Aid smile, was plastered on billboards and shirts, with a $50,000 reward offered in hopes that someone would recognize her and bring information to her grieving family. For nearly a week, the community rallied to find the missing girl. The initial suspect was a neighbor, a man with a past conviction for assault from over 15 or 20 years ago. However, he had an alibi for the time of Maddie's disappearance and was cleared of suspicion. Not long after, the FBI got involved as local police tried to uncover more leads, but no new evidence surfaced. It seemed like Maddie had vanished off the face of the earth. But everything changed 6 days after Maddie went missing, when the least suspected person revealed the darkest secret. Missy Phillips, Josh's mother, noticed a strange damp spot on their house floor. From there, she began to search her son's room until her attention fell upon Josh's bed. Then she said, "I don't want to believe what I'm seeing." Shocked, she left the house to find a police officer. In that moment, she glanced at the nearby Clifton home, thinking they were still holding on to hope, but their world was about to collapse around them. The officer Missy found had been camping outside the Clifton home during the search for Maddie. Following Missy inside, the officer, upon entering Josh's room alone, witnessed the horrifying scene Missy had discovered. Protruding from under Josh's mattress were the tiny feet of Maddie. I must warn you that the following details of what happened to Maddie are particularly disturbing and not for the faint of heart. Josh had known where Maddie was all along. When he asked Maddie's mom what was happening, when he was handing out flyers, when he seemed concerned for her well-being. All that time, Josh had known Maddie's body was hidden under his waterbed. Police discovered that duct tape had been used to hold the bed frame together and keep her body from being found. Additionally, the shorts she was wearing earlier had been disposed of. Investigators found a baseball bat hidden behind Josh's closet, and they also found a knife concealed in the room. It was also noted that an air conditioning unit sat on top of his dresser, along with freshly burned incense and air freshener spray. More alarmingly, the missing Maddie flyer was placed next to the air conditioning units. This told the police what was a clear effort to mask the odor of Maddie's decomposing body. Perhaps the most alarming discovery was when her body was lifted from the bed, her hands still tightly grasping onto the bed frame, indicating she was still alive when she was pushed beneath it. If she was alive when people were out searching for her, or when Josh was outside pretending he didn't know what had happened to Maddie after she left his house, we may never know. But what's clear is that if Josh had reported what had happened, Maddie might have lived. The autopsy revealed Maddie had suffered 3 blows to the head, and it's believed Josh's baseball bat, found in his possession, was used as the weapon. Her throat was also slashed with a knife from Josh's room, and she was stabbed 7 to 9 times in the chest, though some sources claim as many as 11 times. The autopsy also showed no signs of sexual assault despite her underwear being removed. However, this detail would later emerge as crucial evidence. Josh Phillips was arrested, shocking everyone. Those who had met Josh described him as a reserved but friendly child, nothing particularly noteworthy about him. However, within hours, he confessed to killing Maddie on the day she was reported missing. It was in this confession that Josh recounted what had happened to Maddie. Remember, this is his version of events. Josh was home alone when Maddie showed up and asked him to play, and he knew he wasn't supposed to have friends over when his parents weren't home. They played baseball in his backyard, and Maddie accidentally got hit in the eye with the ball, causing her to start bleeding and crying loudly. To calm Maddie down, he took her inside, but she kept screaming, which frightened Josh. Josh told investigators he feared his dad would come home at any moment, and he'd be angry at Josh for having Maddie over without permission. Terrified and wanting Maddie to be quiet, he grabbed his baseball bat and struck her in the head once or twice before hiding her body under his waterbed. When his dad finally came home, Josh claimed Maddie was still moaning. He then pulled her out of bed and stabbed her in the chest before hiding her body again until his mother found it. How anyone could not wonder and be horrified to this day is unfathomable. That if Josh was sleeping on top of her in his bed, and the horrifying answer seems to be, for a week. Josh had no history of violence, nothing that could make anyone suspect him, especially his actions when he helped search for Maddie, but Josh's version of events still didn't quite add up for investigators. For starters, he claimed Maddie's shorts and underwear were pulled down when he pulled her inside from outside. Most people could agree, as investigators did, that his explanation seemed unlikely. The community was left reeling and horrified to know the boy who had helped search for Maddie just days earlier was the one who killed her. Some began to question the Phillips family about how they hadn't noticed the young girl's body hidden in the house for nearly a week. Missy explained that there was nothing suspicious for her to suspect anything. However, there were signs that something was amiss, which only truly makes sense in hindsight, particularly Josh's silence since Maddie was reported missing. But this was explained away as him worrying about his friend and being scared. Additionally, if you're familiar with this case, you might have heard that police had previously searched Phillips' home in the days before her body was found. The police chief at the time stated they had searched the home, but officers never saw anything suspicious. How police and Josh's parents didn't notice the smell of decomposing flesh surpasses me. Josh claimed he hid Maddie because he was afraid of his dad, but the truth behind his family's life was not disclosed until Missy publicly explained. She said she and Josh walked on eggshells at home because her husband was too terrifying, scary, and sometimes too aggressive. He really didn't like it when any neighbor kids were in the house when there weren't adults there to supervise, but he especially didn't want Josh spending time playing with any younger girls. Missy said he didn't like little girls, something she never understood. Additionally, Josh's father, Steve, never had a chance to explain his perspective, as he died in 2000 in a car accident. When the case went to trial, Josh was charged as an adult. Josh's defense argued that what happened to Maddie started as an accident and escalated due to panic, near insanity, and that he should be charged with manslaughter. But the prosecution didn't buy it. Firstly, the autopsy didn't find any evidence of bruising on Maddie's face, as if she had been hit with a baseball. In fact, there was no evidence they had ever played baseball. Secondly, Josh also claimed he pulled Maddie inside, but there were no dirt stains on her body, implying her shorts likely didn't come off from being pulled. Furthermore, there was no blood in the backyard or anywhere in the house except for Josh's room. Finally, Maddie was found only wearing a shirt and socks, indicating at least some discrepancies with the evidence. The trial lasted only about 3 days in total. The jury concluded Josh was guilty and sentenced him to first-degree murder. He was given a life sentence in prison with no chance of parole, but because he wasn't yet 16, he wasn't eligible for the death penalty. Behind bars, Josh transitioned from a teenager to an adult. Josh still refuses to detail the killing of Maddie except in 2018 to apologize to Maddie's family. Growing up, I learned the value of life. I wish I knew this or understood it when I was 14. If I hadn't done this back then, I don't know what life means. Josh has had moments of tears reading his apology letter, but this doesn't necessarily indicate genuine remorse. It could be a performance to demonstrate he's reformed to increase his chances of a reduced sentence. Exploiting and taking advantage of others to serve their own purpose is a narcissistic trait. Josh seems to focus more on his own apology than on the victim, instead about himself and his own pain, which could be a result of other narcissistic traits such as grandiosity and entitlement. Now, the story seems to end there, but it doesn't. In 2017, the case was retried, something that should never have happened to Josh based on his first sentence. However, in 2012, the Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences without parole are unconstitutional for juvenile offenders convicted of murder. More horrifying details about the case were uncovered at this trial. It was revealed that Josh had books on a worrisome subject in his room. Additionally, it was shared that Josh had viewed adult content on his computer just half an hour before Maddie's death, and it was violent and potentially involved underage girls. Josh may have been influenced by these videos and may have been imagining doing something similar to himself. This may indicate that the crime was premeditated more than something that happened in the heat of the moment as Josh initially claimed. If this is true, perhaps he didn't specifically choose Maddie, but instead he seized the opportunity when he found himself alone and unsupervised with her. Maddie's mother spoke at the trial and asserted that Josh didn't pursue Maddie that day in 1998, but her other daughter, Jessie, when she was only 11. A photo of Jessie was found in Josh's room, one that Josh presumably stole from the Cliftons' house at some point before Maddie's death. This only adds to the notion that he was obsessed with Jessie, along with Clifton's other daughter. Josh's sentence remained unchanged after the 4-day trial, and he remains in prison. It's still a story of a case that will continue sooner than you think, as Josh will once again be eligible for retrial in 2023, after serving about 25 years in prison. At least for now, this case is far from over, and it won't be long until it is.
You ever heard the name Jennifer Schuett?
Yes.
Did you ever have occasion to come in contact with her?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
No. My whole life for the past 20 years has been utterly and completely because of my mistake.
I can tell, obviously, this affects you a lot, but I think you would, if you were to see her, I think you would be extremely proud of her. I really do.
Oh, thank you. She's alive.
Yes, she's alive.
She's alive.
She's alive.
8-year-old Jennifer Schuett was kidnapped, assaulted, silenced, and left for dead. She was only a child at the time and lost the ability to speak after she was horribly wounded by her attacker. But she survived, remembering every detail, and went on to solve her own case, finally putting an end to Dennis Earl Bradford's reign of terror. I wanted to help because I was the only living witness. In the small town of Dickinson, Texas, a curious little girl named Jennifer lived with her single mother, Ellen, in a small apartment in a rough neighborhood. As far back as I can remember from my childhood, I didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, so I found comfort in going to bed with my mom. We were all that we had. It was just the two of us. On August 9, 1990, at 2:30 a.m., Ellen asked Jennifer to sleep in her own room because she needed to wake up early the next morning. Jennifer went to her room and read until she fell asleep. In the morning, Ellen couldn't find Jennifer, and the window of her bedroom leading out to the parking lot was wide open. Sometime early Friday morning, 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett was abducted from her bedroom. Jennifer's mother entered the room and found the window open and her daughter gone. "Jennifer, Jennifer," I called out, but there was no sign of her. She was just gone. The police arrived and immediately began their search. It quickly became evident to the officers that this was not just a runaway case. As any new developments arise, I'll be more than happy to share them with you. Later that day, at 6:30 p.m., the police received a call from parents in the area. Their children were playing in a field near town and stumbled upon something. Horrifyingly, they realized it was the body of a little girl. I remember being put into the life flight helicopter. At that point, they knew time was of the essence. They had to get her to a hospital. As she was airlifted, I remember thinking we were dealing with a murder case. Her injuries were so severe that her survival was uncertain. Jennifer's condition was critical. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear. We suspected she may have been sexually assaulted. And really, at 8 years old, you don't fully understand what rape means. She was in such a horrific state that they barred her mother from entering the room. You could see the fear in her eyes. Miraculously, her attacker had missed all the major arteries in her neck. It was big news in the small town of Dickinson, Texas. Jennifer's mother was frantic. "It's just been the two of us." We completed her surgery. Her airway was stable. When Jennifer regained consciousness after surgery, her behavior suddenly changed. I was a difficult patient because I had many male doctors, and I was scared of them. The Dickinson Police Department dispatched a whole squad to monitor her hospital room. Between this and the male doctors and staff, Jennifer ended up in a constant state of panic. Everyone was a suspect in my eyes. A strange detail at the time was her distrust of all police officers, which would make more sense once Jennifer began to share her story. With Jennifer, we had a survivor who couldn't speak. The challenge was to gather information from her. Now we're talking about an 8-year-old. Jennifer couldn't communicate directly with investigators. With no other option, they gave her a notebook and pens and asked her to respond in writing. Mostly, I wrote notes to my mother, who handed them to the officer outside. At just 8 years old, she was considered very intelligent for her age. She was incredibly detailed in her descriptions. So after falling asleep in her bedroom, she woke up in the arms of a stranger. He was running with me, carrying me down the sidewalk, and I immediately tried to scream, but he covered my nose and mouth. He whispered that he was a police officer and she needed to calm down. They got into a car and he held her on his lap as they drove away. At that point, she knew something was wrong. She knew the police were the good guys, but she had been taught never to trust a stranger. As a child, I wanted to believe him, but the part of me that was scared of the dark knew something was really wrong. This revelation helped investigators understand her distrust of males, especially police officers. I started to realize I had been kidnapped. I was very afraid of what would happen next. To calm her down, the man parked at the local elementary school. He said they would wait until the sun came up for her mom to pick her up. I remember anxiously waiting for those headlights, but they never came. The man smoked and drank, offering her candy, a big red flag for anyone familiar with stranger danger or child safety programs taught in schools at the time. He said, "Well, your mom's not coming," and started the car. They drove out of town and stopped in a field. Jennifer began asking questions. I was a very curious 8-year-old. I was interrogating him. I wanted him to prove he was a police officer. I asked, "Where's your gun? Where's your badge?" He told me his gun was in the back seat, so I stood on the front seat to look into the back. And that's when it happened. Out of respect for Jennifer and other victims, we won't detail the wow, as it's extremely graphic. When she woke up, she was dragged by her ankle, naked, through a field. It's crazy that someone so young would know exactly what to do in that situation, but I played dead, knowing it was my only chance. He dropped my legs. I heard him walk away. He left her for dead on an anthill. As the sun rose, she heard children playing and dogs barking in the field. I realized I couldn't scream. I only had enough strength to put my hand on my neck and see it covered in blood. At that point, she was drifting in and out of consciousness, but the fire ants kept biting her, waking her up. Even as death loomed, she remembered every detail, thinking that if she survived, she would catch him. I remember saying he looked greasy and might have had a scar on his face. I remember writing that there were beer cans in the car and the brand of cigarettes he smoked, every detail I thought could help find him. By asking him questions in the car, she even got him to say his name. So, I wrote. He said his name was Dennis. A sketch artist helped her turn her memories into something the police could use. I couldn't talk, so I described him through notes without saying a word. Jennifer helped create this, but unfortunately it didn't seem a strong case for police. They shared the sketch with the public, but it didn't lead anywhere, and the small police department found only some of Jennifer's and her attacker's clothes in the field. It was so frustrating, not being able to say what I wanted to, how I wanted to. She tried to express her anger but became more frustrated by not being able to speak her mind, and that's when a miracle happened. In one of her silent rages, a tiny sound came out. Doctors were shocked. Her vocal cords were almost cut in half and weren't expected to reconnect, but they started to heal. I even got my voice back in the hospital. I haven't stopped talking since. Shortly after being discharged from the hospital, Jennifer returned home and even went back to school the following year. But going back into the world where I was so brutally attacked, who would want to face that, she wondered. The trauma wasn't just mine alone. The whole town of Dickinson was affected because everyone was on edge. No one knew who had done this to me. The police increased their presence, stationing officers in schoolyards and even inside classrooms. As time passed, leads grew cold, resources diminished, and frustration mounted. The case went cold, and Jennifer waited for 18 years without any progress. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Detective Tim Cromie took over the case and wanted to meet with her. For the first time in years, a police officer reached out to her with hope in his voice. Sitting down with Jennifer, Detective Cromie said, "Jennifer, I promise you, I will do everything within my power until the end of my career to get the answers you need for this case." Those words transformed her outlook. "It felt like he was as committed to solving my case as I was," Jennifer recalled. Her involvement in the investigation provided unique insights that were previously unknown. Determined to contribute to solving her own case as the sole living witness, Jennifer worked closely with Detective Cromie. They enlisted the FBI to analyze clothing found at the scene 18 years earlier. Working on cold cases taught them that time was their adversary. People forget, move away, or pass away. One of the advantages of time passing was the advancement in DNA technology. However, as years went by without a breakthrough, Jennifer's optimism waned. "I began to doubt if we'd ever solve this case without a DNA hit," she admitted. The process took a year but proved fruitful.
At 2:30 in the morning, Jennifer received a call from the DNA lab. The examiner informed her, "We got a hit on September 22, 2009. The FBI had a name, Dennis Earl Bradford." "Who is that? We've never seen that name in any report," Jennifer exclaimed. Tim and I connected it back to the notes Jennifer wrote as a child, where she mentioned a man named Dennis. For an 8-year-old on pain medication, unable to speak clearly, her accuracy was monumental. Dennis Earl Bradford, a 39-year-old man from Arkansas, had recently been released from prison for another kidnapping, just 6 months after Jennifer's abduction. He was later arrested for attempting to sexually assault another woman in a bar, using similar methods as he did with Jennifer. His DNA from that assault matched the evidence submitted, linking him to Jennifer's case. The police obtained a copy of Bradford's 1990 driver's license. Comparing it with Jennifer's sketch, they found an almost perfect match. Drawing that sketch based on his driver's license photo was incredibly accurate, Jennifer noted. The surreal moment of Bradford's arrest left her hopeful for a confession, ensuring justice in court. Announcing Bradford's capture, Jennifer faced the media. "I'd like to thank Detective Jim Comey of the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison of the FBI for their relentless dedication over the past year and a half," she stated. "From day one, they never gave up on my case, hearing my voice and witnessing my determination." Preparing for Bradford's trial, Jennifer hoped for closure. "We aimed for August 10th, 20 years to the day of the attack, to come full circle and close this chapter," she reflected. Late nights crafting her victim impact statement spanned 19 years of emotions. However, Bradford took his own life in jail on the trial date, denying Jennifer her day in court. Visiting his grave, Jennifer read her statement aloud. "Dennis Bradford, you chose the wrong little 45-pound 8-year-old girl to try and murder. For 19 years, I thought of you every day, never giving up on finding you. Today, I know my persistence was right." Seeking closure, she was bitten by a fire ant, a poignant reminder from the field that day. Jennifer's journey had two main goals: to find her attacker so he couldn't harm others and to share her story, empowering victims of violent crime to speak out. "I proudly accomplished both," Jennifer asserted. Her determination never let her victim status define her. She pursued starting a family despite being told conception might be impossible due to her assault. "When Jonathan and I learned we were expecting, we were shocked," Jennifer recalled. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter and then a son, their happy ending. Today, Jennifer continues advocating for victims. "I am not a victim, but victorious," she declared. "Despite what they tried to paint me as, I'm just like anyone else out there."
What's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am?
She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carly, Carlie.
And last name?
Brucia, Brucia.
11-year-old Carly Brucia was kidnapped in broad daylight by a predatory attacker. Even though her parents reported her missing within half an hour of her disappearance, Carly's case ultimately went down in history as one of the most heinous crimes committed against a young girl. It all started on January 31st, 2004. Carly had spent the night at a friend's house, planning to be home in time to watch the Super Bowl on Sunday. She informed her friend's mother that she was allowed to walk home and departed around 6 p.m. However, worried parents contacted Carly's mother, Susan, informing her that Carly was walking home alone. Susan, feeling uneasy about her daughter walking even a few houses alone, sent her husband and Carly's stepfather, Steve Kanzler, to find her and drive her home. However, even though Steve scoured the route Carly was supposed to take, he was nowhere to be found, marking the beginning of a nightmare. Steve continued driving around for over an hour, praying that he would somehow remember where Carly was. But when she returns home with Carly still missing, it becomes clear that something is seriously wrong. Susan immediately felt scared and said, "In my heart, in my mind, I know." Susan and Steve then left the house to search again, calling Carly's name from the car window as they drove down the street. Stopping to explore a dense forest, they spotted a red pickup truck moving slowly. Following Carly's footsteps, they arrived at her friend's house, surprised to see a similar red truck parked outside. They both feel uneasy when they realize Carly isn't there either, causing Susan to make an important call for help. She frantically called 911 around 7:30 p.m., unable to keep the terror out of her voice.
911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am?
She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carly, Carlie.
And last name?
Brucia, Brucia.
After the heartbreaking call, police immediately issued a BOLO, or be on the lookout, for Carly and searched the surrounding area for 4.5 hours but found nothing. Meanwhile, Carly's family and friends began creating flyers with her picture on them and started distributing them the following morning. However, something happened during this time that raised suspicions. Carly's stepfather, Steve, was reported to have visited a local equipment rental business to distribute flyers and asked one of the employees if he could buy drugs in the days after all this was over. This employee found it odd that he mentioned that considering his stepdaughter was missing, so they contacted authorities. Detectives also found something amiss with Steve, so they brought him in for questioning. He claimed he had been at home with Susan the whole time, something she could corroborate. After thoroughly verifying his alibi, he was considered a suspect, but Steve gave them another name, Ron Choquette. Ron owned the red pickup truck and seemed to have been dating Carly's friend's mother for about 2 months. He was at home the night Carly stayed over and was the only adult present at one point. Naturally, Steve informed the police about seeing Ron's red truck suspiciously driving around the area they were searching. Investigators tracked and spoke with Ron, but he told them he had been at work before Carly left home and didn't see anything unusual. Moreover, his co-workers confirmed his whereabouts, clearing him from the suspect list in Carly's disappearance case. Police revisited Carly's home a day after her disappearance and spoke with Susan again. She emphasized that her daughter had never run away before, and this behavior was completely out of character. However, statements from Carly's friends painted a different picture. They revealed that the night before, Carly had been very upset and expressed negative emotions about her family several times. Carly also reportedly told her friend at least once that she didn't want to go home because there were too many responsibilities. This disclosure led investigators to speculate for a second time whether Carly might have run away from her friend's house voluntarily. Investigators still couldn't rule out the possibility that she might have encountered foul play, so before leaving the residence, they gave Carly's mother horrifying instructions. They asked her to contact her daughter's dentist to obtain her dental records for identification purposes. The next morning, Carly's classmates arrived at school to find her seat empty, while authorities deployed tracking dogs to assist in the search. The dogs tracked Carly's scent to the parking lot of Evie's car wash, not on her intended route home but a known shortcut. While the dogs eventually lost the scent near the back of the building, the company had some surveillance cameras, and what they captured sent shockwaves through the entire community. The car wash manager reviewed the footage and informed the police that he had witnessed the abduction of a young girl around 6:30 p.m. The stranger initially walked by casually as if he were just passing through, but in the final moment he took a large step toward her and grabbed her arm. He appeared somewhat threatening as he stood directly in front of her, blocking her escape route. She may have felt frightened and panicked, and he may have told her that everything would be okay if she did as he said. As a general rule in abduction situations, it's safer to create a big scene early on. The abductor might be looking for an easy target. If someone fights back and screams, the abductor might be scared of attracting too much attention and back off. You might teach your child that if they're alone and a stranger approaches trying to lure them somewhere, they should make as much noise as possible and try to run away before getting into a car with that person. Once they're alone in a car with someone, that person has complete control and might take the child to a remote location where they're familiar with the surroundings, making escape much more difficult. The abductor might try to persuade a child to come willingly by claiming that as long as they do what they're told, they won't be harmed. Or they might tell the child they'll take them to their parents or a young mother's house to pick them up. You might come up with a safe word for you and your child. Teach them that unless a stranger uses that safe word, they shouldn't get into a car with that person, no matter what the stranger says to try to convince them. You'll need to practice this safe word with your child frequently so they don't forget. In the face of their horror, Carly's parents quickly confirmed the girl in the footage was their daughter, but no one recognized the stranger who approached her and forcibly took her out of frame. However, the footage clearly shows that he is a white man of average height, with black hair and a tattoo on his forearm. He also appears to be wearing a jumpsuit with a name tag attached, but the video isn't clear enough to read the name. In the footage, it seems clear that Carly did not recognize the man as he approached her on the street and said something before grabbing her arm. Within hours, this shocking footage was continuously broadcasted on local news stations, and while hundreds of tips poured in, most proved to be dead ends. Investigators began to fear the worst as time passed, but by the end of that day, they finally got the lead they had been hoping for. Some callers were confident that the man in the footage was Joseph Smith, a 37-year-old mechanic with a long history of criminal offenses dating back to 1993. In fact, he had been on parole for a drug trafficking charge at the time, Carly's disappearance. While most of his criminal violations were drug-related, at least 2 charges in his record involved violence against women, including kidnapping, aggravated assault, and unlawful imprisonment. One of Joseph's co-workers was among those who tipped off the authorities, and 2 days after Carly disappeared, he told the police that the man in the footage looked a lot like him based on his style and clothing. Furthermore, another employee indicated that he seemed anxious and appeared to be under the influence of drugs at work the day after Carly went missing. They also reported that Joseph had been struggling with drug and money issues at work and claimed that he had not shown up for his shift the day before. At this point, authorities decided to review the security footage from the car wash once again, hoping to link Joseph to one of the vehicles captured on tape. They gathered information from his co-workers that he drove a brown Lincoln Town car, but they said it had recently stopped working due to transmission issues. Despite that, the only prominent vehicle was a light yellow Buick sedan that had stopped about 3 minutes before Carly was abducted. The car seemed to drive past initially before quickly pulling into the car wash parking lot. The abductor may have seen Carly walking as he drove by, prompting him to turn into the parking lot and decide to abduct her. It's also possible he saw her shortly after she left her friend's house and then followed her to the car wash. Either way, he may have been contemplating abducting a child long before actually doing so. Seeing her walking alone, he may have viewed it as the perfect opportunity to fulfill his sinister intentions. Unfortunately, detectives couldn't make out the license plate or the person in the driver's seat from the blurry footage, but they knew it was time to pay Joseph a visit. Police went to the home of Joseph's friends, Jeffrey and Naomi Pincus, where he was renting a room after being kicked out of the house he shared with his wife and 3 young daughters. However, although they saw Joseph outside smoking when they first drove through the neighborhood, they received no answer when they knocked on the door. Authorities spoke to neighbors, who said they had recently seen Joseph talking to a woman outside whom they believed to be his sister. They also expressed confidence that Joseph was still inside the residence and hadn't left. Joseph's sister returned to the home and, after speaking with police, went inside to find her brother. Joseph finally emerged from the house and asserted that he didn't hear the detectives knocking because he was asleep. Investigators asked Joseph where he was during the time Carly went missing. He explained that he was at home watching the Super Bowl and told them that his friends could verify his story. They showed Joseph a still image taken from surveillance video, and although he admitted the man looked like him, he insisted he wasn't near the car wash on that day. Next, detectives requested Joseph to roll up his sleeves, and they discovered he had a tattoo on his forearm, similar to the man in the video. They also noticed some cuts and scratches on his hands. As if that wasn't suspicious enough, Joseph also admitted to borrowing Jeffrey and Naomi's yellow sedan on the day Carly went missing. However, he claimed he only drove it to the nearby marina to look at boats before returning home. The police felt quite confident they had their man, but when they spoke to Naomi, she corroborated his alibi, casting doubt on everything. About an hour after detectives arrived at the house, Joseph's probation officers showed up to assist by conducting a thorough search of his damaged Lincoln Town car. They quickly found drugs in the car, including numerous syringes and spoons, and Joseph was arrested for violating probation. Later that day, Jeffrey, Joseph's friend, contacted the police to provide some concerning information. He confessed that Naomi had mistaken the dates when giving her initial statement to the police, and that, although they let Joseph borrow their car on the mentioned day, he didn't return it until the next morning. Jeffrey also mentioned that he had reset the odometer before Joseph left, and when he checked it upon his return, he had driven over 300 miles. Additionally, the interior of the car appeared disheveled, with the back seat removed. Finally, when asked if he remembered what Joseph was wearing when he left the house, he said it was mechanic overalls. Jeffrey and Naomi agreed to a search of their home, but authorities found no valuable evidence. After hearing that Joseph had been arrested, his mother stormed into the auto repair shop where her son worked and demanded to know why the employees had called the police to arrest her son. However, despite her outburst, her co-worker felt that she also believed it was her son on the CCTV footage. When she declared, "If Joe did this, I'll get the truth out of him." Joseph's mother saying, "If Joe did this," is a sign that she allowed the possibility to enter her mind and didn't dismiss it. A mother who is 100% certain her innocent child would be much more definitive, such as saying, "He didn't do that." Meanwhile, investigators continued to search wooded areas around where they believed Carly was abducted, but they also reached out to forensic staff from the Sarasota City Sanitation Department and requested they ensure the facility turned over to organize a dumpster search the next day. They had no idea that by that time the search would no longer be necessary. While Joseph was being held in custody, one of his longtime friends went to the police station and requested to speak with the investigators. Besides telling them that the man in the CCTV footage looked a lot like Joseph, he also informed them of instances where he talked about his escalating desire to harm women. Immediately after this meeting, detectives transferred Joseph from jail to the police headquarters for formal interrogation. The following interrogation footage has never been seen before.
I want to just talk. You and I have some things to talk about. Okay, because some of the things at the house, we got to get straight. That's the most important thing.
Okay.
And this room is about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's the most important thing that goes on in this room.
I was already advised to talk to a lawyer.
I can't talk to you. You have requested a lawyer.
What about my family? Why can't I call them? You know, I want to talk to my parents or my brother.
Can I contact the public defender's office for you? And they can bring a lawyer down here. But it is a federal building. It's against the law for you to smoke in here.
I mean, like outside or something.
Not right now.
Can I call my mom?
Not right now.
So what? What's the guy coming?
Yeah, we're working on it right now.
I need to talk to my family. See what's going on.
Joseph wanting to speak with his family is understandable, as he may want to get their advice on what he should do, or so he can explain to them what happened. Joseph finally gets taken back to jail, where he ultimately calls his brother John, and what he tells him confirms everyone's worst fears. On February 5th, 5 days after Carly went missing, John contacts authorities and requests to meet them at his residence. When the police arrive, he tells them he knows where Carly's body is and directs them to a wooded area behind a church, just a few miles from her house. According to John, his brother confessed to the kidnapping and brutal beating of the young girl, but claimed not to remember much about the incident due to drug use. Joseph may be trying to mitigate his culpability by alleging he doesn't remember what happened and was under the influence of drugs. The specifics of the case will show whether this is a viable defense. While John is with investigators, Joseph continuously calls him, phone rings, and appears agitated by what his brother is saying. At one point, John shouts into the phone, "Did you choke her too hard?" Joseph is purportedly heard responding, "Yeah." He then asks if he tied her up, and Joseph admits the body wasn't tied but concedes he brutally beat her and left his DNA behind. Joseph's mother goes to John's house and says that Joseph had also contacted her earlier that day from jail and confessed to killing Carly. The police then swarm the church, and they quickly discover Carly's body partially concealed in the wooded area. Investigators speculate she was dragged to the location, based on abrasions on her right side. The autopsy later lists the cause of death as strangulation and notes she was also brutally beaten. Additionally, linear marks on both of her wrists indicate she was bound at some point. Forensic testing reveals Joseph's DNA and hair fibers on Carly's body and clothing, and he is subsequently charged with her murder. Adding to the case against him, a search of the yellow sedan revealed 2 hairs matching Carly's, as well as some fabric fibers consistent with the shirt she was last seen wearing. Investigators hypothesize that after borrowing his friend's car, Joseph used a combination of drugs, and that's when he spotted Carly walking alone. It was just a chance encounter that led him to abduct, assault, and murder the innocent 11-year-old. Meanwhile, the community is outraged that Joseph could have been free to roam from the start after being convicted 13 times in the past 10 years for various offenses. Furthermore, about a month before Carly was abducted, a Florida judge had been asked by local authorities to issue a warrant for his arrest, based on probation violations. However, the judge never did so because it was alleged the police hadn't completed the necessary paperwork. On October 24, 2005, Joseph Smith was convicted of first-degree murder, as well as separate charges of assaulting a child under 12 and kidnapping. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection for Carly's murder and life without parole for the other charges. However, on July 18, 2017, a judge overturned the death sentence for Joseph based on a new law requiring unanimous jury verdicts. The jury in the first trial had voted 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. Joseph ultimately died in prison while awaiting a new sentencing trial in 2021. The police also suspected Smith in the unsolved murder of Tara Riley, whose naked body was found in a retention pond behind a Walmart in Bradenton, Florida, in 2000. However, Brucia's horrific death spurred legal action. In 2004, a bill named Carly's Law was proposed, amending existing laws to tighten provisions for sex offenders. However, the bill did not pass Congress and appeared to have been abandoned. The tragedy haunted the Brucia family. In July 2005, Brucia's mother lost custody of her 7-year-old son after failing a drug test. At that time, Chopin said she turned to drug use because the pain of my reality was unbearable. Sadly, she passed away from a heroin overdose in April 2017.